Good morning, everybody. We hope that you're well. We hope that your families are well, and we hope that your preparations are going well. This morning, Mr. Miller has instructed me to speak to you about land expropriation. Land expropriation without compensation. Imagine that you and I were married and we got divorced, and it was a contentious divorce, and it ended up in court. And you said to the judge, well, Simon is not a very good guy. He's done this 10 times, and he's done that 20 times, and he's done the other 30 times. I might say to the judge, Your Honor, it is true that I have not been a good spouse in this marriage. But the following CCTV evidence and the following credit card transaction receipts and the following eyewitnesses prove that although I did bad things, I only did this once, that twice, and that 3 times. With that in mind, we'd like to discuss land expropriation without compensation in its true terms, without denying facts, without making pretenses, propaganda. Just to discuss it in its true terms. You may feel more strongly, I may feel more strongly, you may feel less strongly, I may feel less strongly. The political aspect, the sentimental aspect, the emotional aspect is not part of this conversation. Let me put it to you this way. About 10 days ago, in the town of Hofmeyr in the Eastern Cape, a gang of guys went to some farmers and some property owners in the dorp. And they gave them notice that they would be confiscating a house and some land and a farm. They had supposedly official documentation with them. Now, those people who are going to lose those properties, supposedly, chased the guys away. And they took their documentation with them, so we'll never know whether it's legitimate documentation or not. But it appeared to the readers as if that documentation was official documentation from the provincial government of the Eastern Cape in Port Elizabeth. A few days ago, the day before yesterday in fact, on the Tarkastadpad, Queenstown 2, a similar thing happened. 2 groups of men in bakkies, as far as we can tell, the one bakkie from photographs, the one bakkie had about 4 guys in it and the other 6 to 8 inside and on the back. And these men went to a number of farms with documentation, maps and so on, and said to the people that they found there, in some cases the farmers, in some cases not, that they would be taking over those farms in 1 month's time, that they were giving 1 month's notice. And that they didn't want to cause trouble, they didn't want to cause harm, that the people's welfare was not at risk. But they were coming back in a month to take the farms, and they gave strict instructions that the farms should not be locked. They didn't want to have to break locks to get in, break down doors, and so on and so forth. The farms should be left open. You didn't hear any of that, did you? This morning, Kuni Maria, our senior manager, informed me that Aaron van den Berg, who many of you know as our IT boffin, the man who runs our protestkaarte and such, has 64 recorded incidents of farm invasions in recent weeks. You didn't hear that, did you? You didn't hear it because the media is not talking about it. And whatever they are saying is in false terms. They're building a wall, on one side of which is reality, and on the other side of which is what you get to hear. It's just not possible that between Internet Online and News 24 and Times Media Limited and so on and so forth, ad infinitum, it's just not possible that there are no journalists and no editors who can see what we can see. Therefore, their decision not to report accurately and honestly has to be deliberate. And we must begin to recognize this. We must begin to recognize the fact that the media is part of the, for want of a better word, conspiracy. As somebody said to me in the USA, I used to believe in conspiracy theories. Now I know that they are only conspiracies. The point being that you can laugh a little bit about it, and sometimes it seems like people are getting neurotic and paranoid, and sometimes it seems as if people are getting carried away. But the reality is that there is no way that all of these events can be taking place that you see on Landsweer Broadcast, our WhatsApp group, and that you see on our web, and the media doesn't report. It just doesn't make any sense. So it has to be deliberate. And therefore, we hope you'll forgive the use of the word conspiracy. But there's something going on here that doesn't make sense. Do you remember in December when everybody was celebrating the election of Cyril Ramaphosa? Suidlanders was the only party pooper in South Africa. The only organization in South Africa that said prominently and conspicuously, Cyril Ramaphosa is not your friend. He is an ANC dog on an ANC leash, to use an expression that was used in conversation with me by a senior traditional leader, the king of one of our nations, our countries, I should say, kingdoms. Cyril Ramaphosa is to the marrow of his bones a servant of the ANC. The ANC made him what he is, and the ANC can take it all away. That's how real power works. He's not an independent actor by any stretch of the imagination. At that time, people said that we were negative. People said that we weren't making any effort to see the silver lining in the cloud. That we were being deliberately negative, but we weren't. We were pointing out the fact that this guy is not a Messiah. This guy is not a noble character in some kind of stage play by William Shakespeare. He's a servant of the revolution, finished and klar. And what happened? As at the first opportunity, he said, we're going to take the land without compensating. And it didn't make sense. Cyril Ramaphosa, why is he so urgently? It was like he was almost falling over himself to execute an instruction. And time has proven that of all of the organizations in South Africa, every single one of them, the Suidlanders, between the left and the right, it doesn't matter. Suidlanders was the one organization that said prominently, this is not a good thing. It may be the lesser of the evils, but it's not cause for celebration. It's not a good thing. And in fact, perhaps it is the greater of the evils. Those of you who might have studied political science, sociology, anthropology, or history at university, or at school, history anyway, will be familiar with the phrase that in the 1913 Land Act, 90% of the land was given to 10% of the people, and 90% of the people, that is to say the black Africans, received 10% of the land. In fact, it was increased to 13%. Now, on the face of it, that's true. But the problem comes in when intelligent, highly intelligent newspaper directors, editors, and journalists don't point out what that population was in absolute terms at that time. And this is why we said at the beginning, we want to talk about the facts and not the sentiment. It doesn't matter whether you agree or disagree with the rights or the wrongs of the 1913 Land Act that was implemented in South Africa by Great Britain. The point is, whether it was right or wrong, there is a degree that makes a difference here, a massive difference. Let me put it to you this way. The black African population of South Africa in 1904, so 9 years prior to the 1913 Land Act, was 3,491,056 people. Let's say by 1913 it was 4 million, 4.5 million, pick a number. Immediately you can see that the amount of land given to the black populace of South Africa per person was not what's implied when they tell you at university in 2018 that the Natives Land Act of 1913 gave 10% of the land to 90% of the people. Because you think, dear me, you go and perhaps look something up and you say, oh, there are 14 million black people in South Africa. Dear me, that was so unjust. The reality is that in 100 years, the black African population of South Africa has increased by 1,000%. Now, given that the nominal period of a generation, in other words, the nominal difference in time between any generations, in scientific terms, is 25 years. Some people procreate, God forbid, at 11 years old. Some people procreate, and good luck to them, at 60 years old. What a blessing. But in scientific terms, we use 25 years as the nominal period for a generation. So in 4 generations, this is, guys, here's the science, here are the facts, the figures, the statistics. In 4 generations, theoretically speaking, the black African population of South Africa increased by 1,000%. And nobody's saying these things. It's not that nobody knows them, it's that nobody's saying them. Let me give you another illustration to give you some sort of sense of perspective. The 1904 census that we've just alluded to revealed, as I said, a black population of 3,491,056 people. The 1960 census revealed a black African population of 10,928,264. Right? This point concerning this increase can be further illustrated by the 14.62% increase in the black population between the 2001 and 2011 censuses. You can go and look it up for yourself. So in 20 years' time, if there wasn't land redistribution, land reform, land confiscation, land expropriation, people would be shrieking even more loudly from the rooftops about what a gross injustice, the white people of South Africa had perpetrated on the poor people living in slums, in the cities, and in Deep Sloot and so on. But it would be a false argument, because it wouldn't take into account the real mathematics that lies at the heart of this thing. Why is nobody talking about this? Here's another illustration. The Ingonyama Trust, owned by the Zulu people, the sovereign monarch of the Zulus, King Goodwill Zwelithini Kabego Zulu, is the nominal head of it. But there is a board of trustees, and it has a specific mandate, and that is to administer the land for the greater good of the Zulu nation. The Ingonyama Trust possesses 29.67% of KwaZulu-Natal. Some of you might recall that we have previously quoted 32%. At the time, it was the best source that we had. A published source, a commercial media source. We don't make these things up. But this morning, I read about 29.67%. So let's use the smaller number. It changes everything, doesn't it? It changes everything once you understand whether you like the whites have more land per person, per capita, proportionately. It's not the point. The point is that it's not as if the Zulus, to illustrate this general argument, are sitting in a small, tiny little corner of Natal because the whites are so brutal, we're so cruel, we're so evil, we're so nasty. 10% of the land for 90% of the people. It's a false argument. And the media are perpetuating it. Because, trust me, they are clever enough to know what I know, and what Kuni Maria knows, and what Mr. Miller knows. We're not the geniuses in the room. They know what we know, and 10 times more. They just don't want to say it. You know, this makes me think about a report written by the Institute for Race Relations by Dr. Anthea Jeffrey in, if I'm not mistaken, 2014. At that time, whether it was 2014, 13, 12, doesn't really matter. At that time, she revealed that in 92.7% of the successful land applications, the successful applicants opted for the money, not the land. What does that reveal to you? It reveals to you that the basis of the land argument, the starting premise for the land argument, is a false one. Because the starting premise is not that blacks don't have land. If you look at that argument very carefully, going back years, it has always been, as a starting premise, that land is dear to the black African. It is part of the black African system, the cultural values and the norms and the mores in black Africa. Land means everything to us. Except that in 92.7% of the cases it doesn't. Please excuse me for getting hot under the collar. But I hope that what I'm saying might make you a little bit hot under the collar. Because once you start to recognize these flagrant lies, then you start to recognize Suidlanders' role in this picture. Suidlanders' role has always been to say, this is who we are. You can agree with us or not agree with us, it's okay. But we're going to remain this. And as we walk on this path of our purpose, we're going to reveal to you why we have the attitudes that we do. This has always been the thing. You can pick it up in many, many, many articles consistently over years that are in our internet archives. But we will give you the data, the information, for you to make up your own mind. I'll give you another example to illustrate this point of making up your own mind on the basis of actual facts. In May of we've discussed this previously, I should point out, and I quoted erroneously November 2016. In fact, this comes from the 22nd of May 2017. It was reported that the Rolf Meyer Institute for Transformation something, but Rolf Meyer's organization had revealed that 4,323 farms that had successfully been bought and taken from white owners had not been transferred to the successful black applicants, the new black owners. So the newspaper guys, the journalists, go off to the Land Claims Commission, and they interviewed the head. I forget her name. And she said very clearly and repeatedly, it's because the people who win these claims, the moment that they've won, start fighting with one another. Fighting over whose land it is actually. Remember, guys, that this land claims process began close to 16, 17 years ago. And it was publicized not on Mnet or on Radio 5, but it was publicized on all of the typically black media channels. The government spent hundreds of millions of rand promoting the land reform process and urging people to participate in it. There is no black person in South Africa. End of story. There is no black person in South Africa who was not aware that if he had a legitimate claim to a piece of land, he could go and submit an application. And yet, when the process was complete or approaching completion, the government said it was a failure. It hadn't worked. We'll have to try something else. The point is that it was a failure ideologically, not a failure mechanically. Those who had a legitimate claim claimed they were successful. They got their land, or in 92.7% of the cases, the money. End of story. But ideologically, Cyril Ramaphosa wants black people to own the land, whether it is legitimate or not. And so you have a situation in which Julius Malema is creating a fever at the grassroots of the black population of South Africa, a fever over this matter. Speaking in simple terms, the same simple terms that sociology lecturers use to confuse people or to mislead them, to trick them into imagining that 100 years ago 40 million people were dispossessed of land. It's nonsense. It's nonsense. We urge you, ladies and gentlemen, familiarize yourselves with the facts. I'd like to bring up something else that people are not considering, that's not being reported, but it's so obvious. It's such an obvious part of the argument. An intelligent newspaper editor or journalist or director must be able to see this. Let's say that one of these promised land grabs on the Tarkastad occurs in a month's time. The people were given, as I told you, 1 month's notice. And the farmer says, all right, well, I'm a little bit afraid of what might happen to me. So I'm going to accede. You can have the land. But I'm selling all of my stock, naturally. and selling all of my farm implements. Naturally, because it's not the land. And it's not the buildings on the land, which you could kind of argue is an extension of the land, or is part of the property. I'm not saying it's right, but you could argue that. The implements are not. And nobody's talking about the stock, the animals, the livestock. Now here comes the successful bully, because he's bullied this farmer off the land, really. And he takes over. Where is he going to get the money for new stock? And where is he going to get the finance to see him through the first 5 or 10 years before the farm starts paying for itself, or before the livestock start paying for themselves? Another question which the liberals, the academics, the mainstream media, and others are deliberately ignoring or overlooking is, what happens to that farmer's debt? Now he's lost the farm, and perhaps he's in debt to ABSA for 5 or 10 million rand. What happens to that money? Any of you who know a little bit about business will understand that, let's say, Apple has $100 billion of sales in a year. And some people might be sitting in a room talking about this, and the first guy, the most ignorant guy, he's not a businessman, says, "Whoa, gee, Steve Jobs must be a rich man, $100 billion. The next guy says, "Well, no. They have to pay," I read it in an article yesterday, about 50% of the cost of producing a phone or an iPad or whatever is costs. So actually it's only about $15 billion of profit. The next guy says, "Whoa, but the overheads eat up the majority of the rest. It's only about $10 billion that Steve Jobs gets." The next dude says, "Well, in fact, last year Apple paid whatever amount in corporate tax. So in fact, it's only $5 billion. And so it goes on until the guys in the room realize that maybe the profitability, when all is said and done, of Apple is, say, $1 billion. Now, with that example in mind, if you also know a little bit about fractional reserve banking, you will know that if there are large-scale land grabs in South Africa, and if 15,000 farms and other properties, such as the peri-urban properties of Ekurhuleni that were discussed recently, are taken, and their debts are not serviced, our entire banking system will collapse. Not might collapse, but will collapse. It's simple arithmetic. With all due respect, it's not even mathematics. It's plus and minus. Simple arithmetic. Grade 1, grade 2, grade 3 stuff. And they're not talking about it. Something is going on for which we don't have a complete explanation. And nobody in South Africa, of whom we are aware, has a complete explanation. There's something cooking here, guys, and it's not good. We urge you, please try to familiarize yourselves with the facts so that one organization in South Africa can continue to remain head and shoulders above the rest, not in the spirit of vanity or conceit or ego. No, we must always remain humble before the Lord, but let us continue to strive to be the organization in South Africa that knows what it's doing and what it's talking about. While everybody else stumbles about blindly, let us have a clear sense of direction, a clear sense of purpose. Let us know why we are doing the things that we are doing. so that we do them in the right way, so that we protect our futures as best we can through very, very difficult times that lie ahead of us. I think that that's everything that we needed to say today. Please give it some thought. Give thought to the fact that we are being beguiled, we are being gulled, we are being deceived, tricked, gekil. It's beyond dispute. Because what's not being told to us is so obvious. On behalf of Mr. Miller, I'd like to wish you all a good, happy, healthy period that lies ahead. It's going to be a difficult period, particularly if the land grabs begin. Because if they begin in Hofmeyr or Tarkastad or Ekurhuleni, or as Gauteng Premier David Makuga insisted yesterday, in Gauteng, imminently, it will be like a dike or the cracking of a dam. It will only take one droplet to guarantee the next 100 million metric tons of water. There is no possible way that if there is one successful land confiscation in Tarkastad, Hofmeyr or wherever else, that millions of other people are not going to immediately say, well, where's mine? The clamor will be so overwhelming that the government will not stand a chance of resisting it. You can rest assured that if this thing begins, it will be out of control from the beginning. It is not the kind of thing that you can control. The first dude will set an example to everybody around him who feels dispossessed, who believes the nonsensical rhetoric of the universities, the newspapers, and Julius Malema. They don't know any better, and they don't want to know any better. They will all be jumping on the bandwagon at once, and it will get out of control at once. We're not sowing panic, but we are making you conscious of the potential challenges on the horizon that the media and others will not tell you about. Unfortunately, it falls to us to do this, to be the ones to talk in hard terms. It's not about sowing panic, it's about making you aware of the truths. So, in the difficult time that may well lie ahead of us, we pray for you and your families, and we pray for our people. May God Almighty be with us. May He guide us and protect us. Thank you, and bye-bye.